Welcome to the One Gang Worldwide podcast, your ultimate ride into the world of motorcycles. Visit cyclesworldwide.com where we offer a completely free marketplace for everything motorcycles. Join our One Gang community where you can connect, share info, and swap stories with riders from all over the world. Join for free at cyclesworldwide.com and be a part of the One Gang community right now. Today we're joined by the great Kenny Cummings. Kenny is the mastermind behind NYC Norton, a renowned vintage motorcycle restoration shop specializing in Norton bikes. In this episode, we dive deep into Kenny's fascinating journey from a musician and keyboard programmer to becoming a celebrated professional in the world of classic motorcycle restoration and racing. Get ready for an engaging and inspiring conversation with one of the most dedicated and meticulous professionals in the industry.
I mean, it's incredible. You can look at the money that comes in. I remember once when I was building 3 Sealies, I'm sort of digressing, but I had like 200 grand in the bank and I had bills for $195,000. You know what I mean? I know, so man. It was like, people don't realize that.
One Gang Worldwide podcast, brought to you by Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping. Since 1978, Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping has been the trusted name in transporting motorcycles safely across the country. With custom-designed pallets and air ride trailers, your bike is secure and protected every step of the way. By choosing Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping, you're supporting a dedicated small business that prioritizes quality and customer satisfaction. Ship with a peace of mind, knowing your motorcycle is in expert hands. Visit keyboardmotorcycleshipping.com for more information. Now, let's dive into today's episode.
What's up, One Gang? We got a great show for you here today. We got Kenny Cummings of NYC Norton from New York City. This guy is, let's just call it English bike genius. So we will see and hear his journey and looking forward to hearing. Thanks for joining us, buddy.
Hey, man. Good to be here.
Thanks for joining us. We're excited for this one.
Good.
So let's start from the beginning. Growing up in Seattle, what were some of your earliest passions or hobbies that you immersed yourself into?
Yeah. So the story really goes, my mom and dad divorced when I was a young kid, and my mom moved up to Seattle and went back to college. She was young, and so I grew up with my mom, and she had this, like, my mom's such a hopeless romantic. She had this ideal of this little blonde boy playing piano in her living room. So she bought a baby grand piano and I started playing piano and took piano lessons. And then, I was a little bit of a troublemaker. So my grades started to fail and I wanted to be in a band. And she said, if you get your grades up, maybe I could buy you a synthesizer. I really wanted to get a synthesizer because I was a keyboard player at the time, and all the guys were playing guitars and stuff, and I couldn't compete with my piano. What am I getting? I'm not Elton John, So no kid in a band's gonna carry a piano around to gigs with them. So my mom was like, "I'll buy a synthesizer and you can plug it in." So she bought me this Art Odyssey synthesizer, and this is actually ties into the whole place of where I'm at right now. If you've ever seen an old synthesizer, it's a bunch of knobs. It's not a button, you got to program it. And so I had to figure out the signal path and, an oscillator into a filter, into an amplifier, and the signal path that works with a synthesizer is the same way you troubleshoot a race bike. It's all part of the same DNA. It's all part of the same synapses. So I got to know the synthesizer and I had a particular skill for it. And so I played music all through high school, and I was sort of a little punk kid, and started playing guitar a little bit more because, synths aren't that punk rock, and I needed to be a little bit tougher. So played some guitar, did some vocals. This is all in Seattle. Ended up playing a lot in Seattle. When I graduated high school, I kind of lived outside Seattle, moved into Seattle proper and started playing. And you have to imagine Seattle in the early 80s. It was not what we think of Seattle today. I mean, Starbucks was a little single place in the Pike Place market, and there was no Amazon. The big corporate stuff in Seattle at the time was Boeing and Weyerhaeuser lumber. Seattle was big lumber. I mean, and there was no music scene to speak of. I mean, I shouldn't say that. There was a great music scene, but it wasn't what you think of today. It was very underground. It was cool. It was ironic, sardonic, and but I needed more. Met a girl, moved to New York City, and as soon as I moved to New York City,
Everything
Seattle blew
exploded.
up.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, kind of going back into the music thing. You started playing piano at a super young age, correct?
Yeah, I think I was about 6 years old when I started, 5 or 6 years old, and took to it right away and played Chopin for a while, and then finally said, "Nah, I got to play, Crocodile Rock. Got to do something else." I don't know.
Nice, nice. Do you think your music career kind of like you were talking about, like with the synthesizer, the way you do everything, it's very similar to the way the motorcycle works. Was that transition kind of like part of that whole concept when you did start to mess around with bikes?
Well, the whole motorcycle thing was sort of this thing that came in a little after the fact and almost accidentally. As a kid, I had a dirt bike. I had a Suzuki RM80, which was a race bike essentially, and I, I'm skipping around a little bit, but
It's okay.
I had this dirt bike. A friend of mine had a Honda CB something or other. It might have been a 160, I don't know, but man, we used to take these things and just ride the wheels of them. I didn't know anything about wrenching or
Right.
we just ride the bike until it break, and then I'd take it to a shop and it cost me like $100 to fix it. I'd be like, oh God,
Right.
and where am I going to get this money? But the bikes were always sort of these things that you just lean them against the wall in the garage, and then you wouldn't
Right.
pay any attention to them for a while. But it was always there inside of me.
Were you
And-
naturally mechanically inclined?
No. Well,
Okay.
does the synthesizer programming count? Because I think it all ties in. I've thought a lot about this. I'm not 18 anymore. I think a lot about how I came to the place that I am, and growing up with my mom wanting me to play piano. There were no tools in my house. There was nothing. Maybe a crescent wrench somewhere, and didn't really start getting into wrenching until I bought my first Norton. And there's the old saying, you buy a Norton, makes mechanics out of good men. So for 120
That's
years,
And that's
Making-
so funny.
making mechanics out of good men. So and I'm the ultimate now. I mean, my shop is pretty
No question.
fancy
no
and
question.
elaborate and full of tools now. That's what we do to keep them going.
Hey, and you said, I know we kind of chatted a little bit off the air. You had mentioned that your dad was out in Utah.
Mhm.
What's the story? What's the story there? Was that kind of
Well, I was actually, I don't tell a lot of people this because I know immediately where their head goes. Are you Mormon or something? But I was born in Utah. My dad actually, I grew up in Utah until my mom and dad divorced when I was 5 or 6 years old, and then she moved us up to Seattle. But my dad's still there. My dad owned a radio station, a rock and roll station, and so he would always get me tickets. I'd be like fifth row to see Kiss, and like boom, and the
Man.
fire going
Yeah,
up and stuff.
yeah.
So I always had cool rock and roll stuff. Plus, my dad was always a motorhead and would take me to the drag races, and his radio station sponsored a Top Fuel drag racer. So I kind of grew up. That was
Cool.
the other side of my life. My mom's got me over here playing baby grand piano,
right,
in a double-breasted suit. And my dad's got me at the drag races, meeting Don Garlitz and
right,
Don,
with
the
a
Snake
Kiss
Perdome and-
Kiss concert T-shirt on, yeah.
exactly. My dad, he wasn't into that Kiss stuff himself, but he was like, whatever my kid wants, I'm going to take care of him. And he was
That's
super
cool.
cool about that. And when my mom and dad divorced, he went through his sort of like probably single phase. And I remember going to visit him, and he had an apartment and he had a bike, and he would take me out on his bike. I remember it was loud as hell, and I burnt my leg on the exhaust pipe, and it was
What was-
ferocious. And
What do you
Well-
remember? Which bike?
yeah, I later learned when I got my first Norton, I went to get, I'm in very close touch with my dad now, but at that time it was sort of like weekend visit. And then when I moved away, it was, once a year I'd go see him. But then, since then, I talked to my dad, when I bought my first Norton, I said, hey Dad, I bought a Norton. And he said, what'd you buy a Norton for? And I said, I don't know, man. It just resonated in my head. I've always wanted, I saw that logo. It's just been inside of me, and I just had to get a Norton. So he ran downstairs. He came back up with a photo album, Polaroids of me sitting on his bike when I was a little kid. It was in
That's so
Norton.
cool.
And I was like, oh, no, you're kidding me. Wow. And it was actually a very cool Norton. It was a scrambler. It's actually a matchless Norton hybrid N15 CS bike. And I know it very well now, but man, as a kid, that, it had straight pipes. It was so loud and so evil. It wasn't Harley-esque. It was more scrambler.
Yeah,
But man, we just fly down the road. He'd put me on the front of it, and I'd hold on to the bars. And I remember we got pulled over by the cops once, and all the
cool,
good
man.
stuff.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That is really cool. So your move from Seattle to New York, you had a girlfriend, you moved to New York. How did that influence your artistic and personal growth getting out to NYC?
Well, so the story goes, I had this girlfriend, I was playing in a band in Seattle. We were doing very well. And she was in college. In her junior year of college, she had some exchange program to New York City. And I thought, yeah, cool. So she went out to New York, and I went out to visit her, and I got to New York City. And, my band was doing really well, and I was ready. In hindsight, I could see I was ready to change something big. And I went out to New York to visit her, and I was like, oh my God, look at this. This is the big city. This is everything I want to do. And so she came back after that year, and we hatched a plan that we would move back out as she finished her senior year of college, and I was still playing. So I told the guys, I'm leaving. I'm moving to New York. I'm going to pursue music in New York. And it was exactly that. So we came back to New York, lived together in West Village at the time, and I started, doing some cool stuff. But, I came to New York to put a band together, and I got distracted in the best of ways, and also perhaps not the best of ways. I started working for the studio and started working for bands like the Stones and really big bands. Nice. And then I ended up working for Saturday Night Live for a long time doing keyboard programming. So like weird stuff. And then I would go out on tour with bands doing keyboard programming because I was the dude, I was
Kenny,
the keyboard programmer.
What time frame are we talking about?
We're talking like SNL was like 1990, 1991. Mike Myers was still a young cast member, and so I did the programming for all the keyboards for Sprockets, which was this thing which Mike Myers used to do, like some Euro German like disco thing, and I do all the synth programming and stuff. And
that was a good cast back then.
Yeah, it was a good cast. I remember then I got a call from G.D. Smith, who was the music director, and he said, Elvis Costello is coming on, and he's got this new record out, and it's got a bunch of really cool keyboard sounds. Do you want to program and do the keyboards with Elvis Costello?
Program the keyboard for Costello?
And then play on the show. So I was on SNL, man, after all these years playing with Elvis Costello. Yeah, I had hair down here. I was
sweet.
Different times. Yeah, it was cool stuff. But you see, it's easy to get sucked into that and then lose sight of my whole focus, which was to come and do my own music. And I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, but I toured for a long time with some pretty big bands and made a lot of money and lived pretty comfortably, and maybe too comfortably a little bit sometimes. And I had to sort of pull back, and I lost sight. I broke up with the girl I was with and sort of lost my way for a while. And then decided to, again, do another switch. And around that time, I met the woman who is now my wife, and kind of cleaned up my act and said, I need to get a motorcycle now. This is what I'm going to do to sort of reward myself.
So you were basically partying a little bit hard, doing all this tour? Is that where we're going?
Yeah.
Got it.
It's very easy to lie on a tour bus.
I mean, shit, New York City, early 90s, man. I mean,
and then, just have all this money in your bank account and nowhere to spend it. And so I actually I'm a straight shooter now. I'm as clean as can be. This
Good
is about
for you.
Well, little espresso in the morning. That's my advice.
All right. That's all right.
And Norton motorcycles.
What's up, One Gang? I used to think that if I spent big money on riding gear with a logo on the back, I was getting top quality. I gave Leather Up a shot. I wasn't sure at first, could I really get quality gear without spending a fortune? But after putting tens of thousands of miles on their jackets and vests, I had my answer. No busted zippers, no loose stitching, just solid, well-made gear that lasts. Leather Up carries trusted brands like Milwaukee Leather, Hot Leathers, and more, with gear for every rider and every budget. Plus, their customer service actually cares and picks up the phone, something rare these days. So do yourself a favor, check out leatherup.com. Whether you need jackets, vests, chaps, boots, helmets, or luggage, they've got you covered. And because you're part of the One Gang Worldwide family, use code CW20 at checkout for 20% off your entire order. Stop overpaying, gear up with Leather Up, and see the difference yourself.
Hey, give us one quick cool story from your touring days.
Sure.
In that time frame.
I'll tell you a great story. I
Cool.
don't tell this a lot, but I was out with Patti LaBelle, of all people, and Patti loved me. I played on Soul Train with Patti.
No
Soul
shit.
Train, Don Cornelius. Here's this little white kid with
that's
hair
cool.
down to your playing the grand piano. But so I went, I was out with Patti, and I was real good buddy. I was playing keyboards. I was real good buddies with the monitor engineer. And we were on a plane to go do a show, and we were supposed to have a week off in Bermuda, and it got rescheduled because they were changing some band members. So instead of going to Bermuda, during this flight to Houston, Texas, I found out that we were going to Buffalo, New York after Houston to go into rehearsals to rehearse new band members, and the Bermuda trip was canceled. And I was pissed off, and I went into the bar with the monitor engineer, and we got hammered at the hotel in Houston. And I walked out of the bar, and I grabbed one of the palm trees that was in one of the potted plants outside the bar, and I swung on it, broke, and the sand went all over the floor. And we laughed, and we ran down the hall, and we went to another bar actually in the same hotel, and the cops came in and arrested me and said, we caught you breaking the thing, and they threw me in the drunk tank.
Property.
And so Patty's tour manager had to come bail me out of the drunk tank in Houston, Texas. Still in the same clothes, went to the Houston Astrodome and played with Patti LaBelle in the Houston Astrodome. It's gone now, the Astrodome. They imploded it.
They imploded it yet.
But yeah, so Patti was on stage, and I'm sitting there playing the piano, just wicked hungover. She just kind of looked at me on the microphone. She's like, "Ken, you okay today? You gonna make
Oh, no way, in front of everybody?
Patti knew, and I was looking at her like,
Oh,
"Patty,
that's
I'm
so
so
fun.
sorry, Miss Patti. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." But she took care of me, but that was the kind of, like, that's what I'm talking about, the distraction, good distraction. I wouldn't go back and change anything, but I'm out with Patti LaBelle getting thrown in the drunk tank in Houston, Texas, and I should have been in New York City, playing music, but I was living comfortably, and it was easy to say, okay, we're going to go out and do this again with Patti, or we're going to go out with Aretha, or we're going to go out with The Cult or Midnight Oil or whatever band it was that I was playing with at the time. And, so I had to change everything. And that's where the motorcycle stuff came in. That was a way for me to take that obsession that I obviously had and put it into a constructive,
Yeah, no question.
and I'm circling the drain still. So.
All right. So going from passion to profession, how did your personal interest in restoring the 74 Norton, the Commando, evolve into the foundation of NYC Norton?
Yeah, it was very organic. So once I quit touring, met this wonderful woman who's now the mother of my two kids and my wife. I got a straight job I was in an art book publishing business, and it was a great, I hated it because I wasn't really into art books necessarily, but it paid my mortgage and it paid for everything. Right. And my boss was cool, and she was artistic. And so when my own band needed to go on tour, she'd let me go. So I had that sort of flexibility.
Nice. Very nice.
And I bought my Norton, and so this was all happening concurrently. I had a straight job, had my own band going now. We were doing fairly well, and bought the Commando. And then I went out and started riding the Norton around, and I didn't really know what the hell I was doing. In fact, I didn't even own any tools. I had to go to the hardware store and buy a 1/2-inch wrench, which I still have in my toolbox. My first Ace Hardware 1/2-inch wrench still sitting in my toolbox.
Yeah.
And then I crashed. I went in, I was upstate with some people, and I rode off a turn, and, I've since gone back to the corner that I panicked. I didn't know what to do, and I stood the bike up and went right off and hit dislocated my shoulder and scared the shit out of me, and the bike tumbled, and it was a very low point because I thought maybe this isn't for me, and so after I pulled myself back together, got back into New York City, got the bike back, and went into a shop and looked at the damage, and it was all bent up, and I thought, either I got to let this go or I got to be serious about it. And so obviously I got serious about it. So at that time, we're going to say this is 95 because the internet was just a baby at that time.
Right. Very.
I decided
Al Gore
to...
had just invented it.
Right? Exactly. And I had just secured the domain NYC Norton, so I could... My buddy would take pictures and literally print them, and we would put them on the scanner at the art book place, and I would scan these pictures, and, it's 640 by 480 resolution, this big, and I'd put it on the internet on an America Online site, and NYC Norton, and I would put a little text and say, today, I took the front end off the bike. Boom, put a picture.
Wow.
Today,
You started this.
I did this. Yeah.
You were blogging before blogging was cool.
Exactly. And the word blog wasn't even used, but I was doing this.
Yeah.
And, Norton guys, they're a generation older than me, and people would come to me and say, like, you're the guy with the motorcycle on the internet. And I'm like, yeah, that's me, the guy with the motorcycle on the internet. So NYC Norton is kind of like Band-Aid or eBay or something. It was just this thing on the ground floor, and I got quite a bit of notoriety from doing this and blogging and talking about it. And then I started to get into race and starting to blog about the racing stuff. And that was really like lots of content there because race bikes get torn apart all the time and talk about why stuff breaks. So that was it. And my straight job, I'd be like updating my website, and then someone would walk in my office and I'd pull up a spreadsheet or something and say, oh yeah, nothing to see here, and that's what we did. And then in 2009, when the American economy tanked, the last thing people were doing is buying art books, and these art books that my company did, that they're very serious, very heady New York City style, even fancier than Toshin or something like that. It was museum catalogs and that. And so people stopped. I mean, the business just tanked. And at that time, printed media, as we all know, has gone its way anyway. So my boss laid off half the staff, and after 13 years, I'd lost my job. So I thought,
Man.
oh, shit, what am I going to do now? I had 2 kids, and my wife's got a good gig, fortunately. And so everything was okay. So I started coming to my shop, which was, by this point, I've moved out to Jersey City. I used to be in the East Village of Manhattan, my shop. And I moved the shop out to Jersey City, and I started coming out regularly. And I had won a championship racing, and I'm skipping ahead, guys, so we can go back and touch on some of this.
Yeah.
But I'd won a championship, and I started to get calls saying, that bike you built, that's very cool. Can you do one for me? And I thought, I got nothing but time. Sure, let's do it. And here I am. And
Kenny, was that bike built from the one you crashed, or was this another one?
No. The one I crashed is my 74 Commando, which I still have. I don't ride it that much. Racing, we'll talk about philosophy of racing and how it changes your riding perspective.
Absolutely.
But
Awesome.
My 74 Commando, I rebuilt that, and then I started to build a race bike out of a feather bed frame that I had, which is an older Norton frame, and I put a Commando engine in it and made this very custom, beautiful race bike, and that's what people were like, "Oh my God!"
So can we assume that that's truly the beginning of NYC Norton, the actual business itself?
The business, yeah, yes. In 2011, I incorporated. So what is it now? It's 14 years. 2010, I incorporated. I can't remember, but it's been a while. And yeah, I got a call to do a bike, and I was sort of doing it off the books, but then these bikes aren't cheap, and when money starts coming in like that, you got to be legit because the government's saying, what are you doing over there with your motorcycles? Is this a hobby or is it a business? And it's a business, and it has its profits and losses. So yeah, I had to incorporate. And
take us a little bit into that decision. And here's what I'm trying to ask you is, you built that race bike for yourself. People dug it. You started getting phone calls. You made the decision now at this point in time to after working 13 or 12 years for this catalog company to now start your own, this art company, I'm sorry, to now start your own firm. Take us a little bit into the early days of opening up NYC Norton and some of the challenges you kind of faced. I think that's an important part of, you know, you going into something completely new, even though it's a passion, it is new. It's not something that you came from prior. Take us a little bit into that part of your life.
It's all been almost accidental. Accidental in the sense that I never looked at anything in my business and said, until recently, and said, this is the way I want to take the business. It sort of happened. So I built my first race bike. It was a featherbed Commando. I won a championship on that bike, a national AHRMA championship. I started, let me tell you this. This is the best part. I built this race bike. It had a big shiny tank, New York City guy. And I go out. I'd gone to the races a bunch of times and I knew I needed to do this. So I got my race bike built, but I never actually raced. It's kind of like buying my Commando. At first, I never even owned a wrench. Now I'm throwing myself in the deep end again, and I'm going out with these guys. And you know, the vintage racing scene is sort of, I would say, not elite by any means. I mean, there's so much money in pro racing, but it's sort of the gentleman. I've got some cash and I'm going to go out and have some fun. But a lot of these guys are former pros and they're fast as hell. And I think vintage racing, sometimes people think, oh, it's just a bunch of fat old slow guys. No, there's fast dudes out there. And I wanted to be one of the fast dudes, but my friend, my first race, I had a French friend of mine and he was so funny. He's smoking a cigarette. He's like, you're so slow. You look stupid. You should stop. And I thought, I'll show you. And so little by little, I worked up and I worked on it over a course of a few years. And I actually have some innate skill of racing and I won a championship. And so when I won that championship, that kind of like put my name out there. Cool. And there was some TV stuff that came. Cafe Racer TV came and did an episode on me and so on and so forth. But what's the real linchpin here is that after the featherbed, I bought a Sealy frame, and I'll just explain to it if anyone doesn't know who Sealy is. Colin Sealy was a frame maker from England who worked with Norton and ended up buying Matchless. Matchless was one of the big, you know, English brands, and he ended up buying the racing division for Matchless, and he would make these bespoke race bikes using Matchless engines and his Sealy frames. And Colin went on to work for Ducati and went on to do worked with Honda in the Grand Prix world for a while, and then went on to do some Formula One stuff, had his own Formula One team for a while. So Collins is some Englishman, but this genius, and his frames were beautiful. So my second race bike I built after my first championship was a Sealy. And as soon as I built the Sealy, that's when people start saying, can you do a Sealy for me? And the frame I got was a replica made by Collins' sort of underling in England at the time, so I could get more frames. And I sort of had a line on that, at least on the American side. So I started building a lot of Sealys. And if you go out to the races, you might see one Sealy in your life, and there's 20 of them in my shop right next door right now. It's pretty cool. So I kind of, that was the accident. I did the Sealy for myself, but it became the Norton and the Sealy and then Matchless. That's sort of the way it all ties together for me. And that was almost accidental. So I built this beautiful Sealy Norton and went out and won 3 more championships in a row on it. And man, that thing changed the way that I
understand.
Oh God, I can just, I became one with that bike. And ultimately I met Colin and he came to Barber, which is a big race event at the end of the year a few years ago. And he was the
Barber in Birmingham.
Yeah, yep. George Barber's
I've been there. It's awesome there, man.
Yeah, it's awesome. Wow, it's like Augusta golf course.
It is. It's incredible,
for motorcycle dorks. And so Colin was there. He was the master of ceremonies for that race weekend. And so I met him. Unfortunately, he passed away the next year. But Colin and I were pretty tight. And now Colin's son, Sammy, is actually doing a documentary on Colin's life. And he's going to be here in May. And he's going to spend a bunch of time in my shop because Colin was sort of sitting there and I had 12 Sealys there. It's giving me goosebumps to even talk about.
That's great.
To be with the man. Yeah. And he was like, "Wow, Kenny, you've really made a commitment here." And I said, "Yeah, it's all accidents, Colin, but so that's the long-winded story of how this evolved. And
Gotcha.
so
Gotcha.
the race bikes are a big part of my business. Street bikes are a big part of my business. So racing, I'm leaving here in 2 hours to hop in the van and pull the trailer, and we're going down to South Carolina to go racing.
Nice.
Sweet. So, Kenny, after you started, you're in the trenches at this point. Was there an identifiable specific moment, like the Cafe Racer coverage, just as an idea, but something like that you kind of felt edified by, that you could really pursue this full time and be successful doing it?
You
Sounds
build a
like there's
race.
many moments. But...
Well, the thing is, when you build a race bike, it takes a while. It takes probably a year from the time you talk to somebody and you start discussing, and it evolves as you build it. You're doing an engine from the ground up, you're doing the gearbox from the ground up, and then you pull the gearbox out, put another one in, and you develop it, and you go to the dyno, you go to the racetrack. So it's a commitment for time. So what happened was, I got my first order for a race bike. The TV show happened. Then I got another order, and I said, okay, well, you're going to have to wait a little bit for this first one to get done before we can start the second one. And then I got another order, and then I got another order. And that's where I'm at now. I'm just 2 years
Gotcha.
cycle of doing this. So even if I said I'm done, I'd stop taking orders. I'm going to go do women's lingerie now, which is, probably my next venture. I still have 2 years of work left in front of me to finish. So it's
Wow,
just
that's
this
good.
cycle that just keeps spinning, and
Yeah.
I can't get out of it. And as my buddy Roper says, I'm spiraling the drain, and
Absolutely.
or it's a comfortable rut. It's a comfortable rut. That's what my buddy Dave
That's
says.
a great way to put it. Yeah.
Kenny, I want to ask you about the entrepreneurship side for, audience that may not have had the opportunity to start their own businesses or do the things they do, but we always like to get into the meat and potatoes of owning
Sure.
businesses. Let's get into a little bit of the challenges. As society sees most things, it's all instant gratification, Instagram, quick, final products, that type of stuff. Can you share with us a little bit about what you personally went through, not only physically, but also mentally, balancing family, bills, life, and also trying to make NYC Norton?
Yeah. It's not what I went through. It's what I'm going through. It never ends. So I'm unemployable at this point in time. I'm a motorcycle racer. I'm a dirtbag, and I have so much attitude. Nobody wants my opinion except for me, and it's going to be my way, and that's the only way it's going to be. And but obviously financial. I think I do bikes with bright, shiny alloy tanks, and they're impeccable and they're beautiful. And I think that the sort of, you go on Instagram and you look at my posts, and I got a cool shop and that, but I'm not getting rich doing this. In fact, sometimes I'm barely making ends meet. And very often there have been times where I haven't taken a paycheck. My guys get paid. I don't get paid. I'm the first one that doesn't get a paycheck when times are tough. And there's a wonderful, I talk about this a lot. When you got a boss and they're emailing you about this spreadsheet, this proverbial spreadsheet at Sunday at 9 o'clock at night, and you're like, oh shit, man, I don't want to hear from her right now. Or him right now. I just want to watch TV or whatever. That sort of stress and, getting meeting deadlines for somebody else, that's an intense amount of stress. So when I started the NYC Norton thing, I started saying well, I could probably do this for a while. There were different stresses, and they were welcome stresses. And the stresses were simply, if I don't go to work, I'm not going to make any money. If I go on vacation for 2 weeks, sure, if I saved up enough money and I want to go out and go on vacation, great, but there's nothing coming into the shop. It's all working with my hands. And there's only so many hours in a day that you can build that. And ways to blow that up and turn it into more money, I guess, is taking on more work and then having staff. And so I got a guy in a few years ago, and I miss him dearly. He finally left and moved upstate, but I hired him to come in, and I felt like he was aligned with me perfectly. In fact, I would show him, okay, here's how you weld, and I'm a hack welder, and I'd go over and I'd show him how to tack something. And then a week later, he's doing the most beautiful beads you've ever seen. He's that kind of guy. And I was like, oh, this guy's great. But in payroll was killing me, and this guy's making a fair wage to live in New York City. And I'm like, but so then we start bringing in more stuff. And then, I said, okay, you work on the bike side, got to go racing with the guys. And I started that aspect of the business of doing the racing. And then he ended up coming racing with us, and then he would race too himself. And that's just the way it works. It's like
right.
good intentions, but not actual. So to answer your question, I'll try and stay on track here. I often get accused. I'm in this luxurious position of having a beautiful shop, beautiful shiny bikes, and great Instagram page and social media. And I'm obviously a gregarious guy, and I can talk and be a good face to the public. But it's not. I'll be the first to say this is not all roses here. We're always dealing with subtenants or the lease or the buildings getting gentrified out or that sort of shit that there have been times where I've thought, God, wouldn't it be great just to get a paycheck and phone it in? Because you can never phone it in.
Right.
You cannot phone it in.
Right.
This is everything I do is about me, and I can't even farm out some of this stuff. Partially because I'm a control freak and I want to regulate my brand, whatever that may be,
Absolutely.
but also because I'll look at a bike, I'll charge X amount of dollars for a bike, and it's not cheap, but I'll look at it and it'll sit there in front of me, and I'll go over and take half the shit off and replace it on my time. Take the top right off the job, the profitability off the job, because of the way that I look at it. I look at hose clamps and make sure that the screws are aligned. Hose clamps,
but
it's
that's
like
good. That's
this
important.
obsession that I have, it's that sort of thing. And nobody else is going to do that but me. So that fastidiousness or OCD that I have can work against me too. Whereas if I just, sort of bring them in and get them right out the door and bring them in, it would be a lot more like, so that's the sort of pains that I have, it's always financial, isn't it? It's always about money.
It always goes to the finances because,
I look at, there's this builder, I don't know if you guys know him, Max Hayes, and he's out in California.
yeah, we just had him on the podcast yesterday.
This guy does the most beautiful stuff in the world.
We just chatted with him yesterday. Yeah. That's so fun.
And he's very serious. And I know Max a bit. And, but he works on his one bike in his beautiful downtown LA space that's about an eighth of the size of my shop. And I think maybe I should do what Max does. Just work on one bike. Cause I got 30 bikes going on in there next door, and it's economy of scale.
You showed me your garage when we spoke, and you got a hell of a collection. He's got a bunch of race bikes in there, some real cool shit in there. Yeah, it's true.
But,
I get it.
But Max, I'm not even going to hazard to say that I'm anywhere near what Max does. His fabrication skills, Norton did all the heavy lifting for me. I just make him a little bit more modernized. And but Max is doing this stuff from the ground. He just did this Ferrari V8 motorcycles.
The 355. That thing's insane.
I love to ride to him on Instagram, and I'm like, it's never gonna work. It's never gonna work. He's like challenging himself.
He's already ridden it multiple times. He said he's like a month and a half away from finishing it up. He's still got some things that he's got to fine tune, but he said he rode with it with a computer on. So he was trying to see, and he said he was hammering, and it was only showing 40% power.
Yeah.
He's like, that's how much this thing still had. And I'm like, damn. I mean, he's a good one, man. He's a good dude. Totally down to earth guy.
We'll talk about this because I'm sure this is all part of your podcast culture, whether you're Harleys or Nortons or Ferrari motorcycles. There was a bump, and I've lived long enough to see this curve come and go. This sort of cafe racer movement that went out. When NYC Norton kind of came to fruition, there was a big, Honda bikes with exhaust wrap and low bars and stuff on it. And that was in, like 2010 era. And what was I going to say? I was going to say that there were so many bike builders out there, I'm a builder. I just work something. I do this. And I always wanted to be not different, but I deliberately tried to steer my business into, how can I say this respectfully? I wanted to make sure that what rolled off the lift was going to last for years and years and years and years and not be caught up. Nortons were original cafe racers. When these guys were riding around the 59 Club, they're on BSA Triumphs and Nortons, you know, it was the English cafe racer was a derogatory term. It was a term to say, you're not a racer, you're a cafe racer. But it became part of our lexicon of like what a distinctive
And
style of
one thing
bike.
about you too is, I mean, you were one of the only ones who truly stayed specialized. You weren't all over the map with different stuff. You stayed specialized and true to what you felt that you can, you know, put out an insane product.
I stuck with what I knew, and I
Exactly.
knew that I could just get better and better and better at it. And that, you know, if you want to know about a Norton motorcycle, come to me.
That's
But
right.
if you want to know about a Honda CB 350, I'm not your guy. You know, I can identify it, but I'm not the guy that's going to do it. But so I guess I'm making the point about Max in the sense that there was all these builders and then this bubble that happened, and they're all gone now. Most of them are gone. But you get somebody like Max Hazen. This dude is doing art and functional art, and he is very special in that. And I'm not even, I make motorcycles. He makes pieces of art. And so he gets this commission, and it's just, I love his vibe. He brings his kid in, he works in the studio in LA. It's small, but it's clean and efficient. And that, you know, so I guess what I'm circling back to is the business pains. It would be nice to just have one bike, and I'm working on that one bike, and I got another one in the wings, but it's not going to get done until this one is ready to roll off and delivered to a customer. And so in the future, maybe that's what I do. I scale back, move to a smaller space. I mean, New York City is so dense to have the amount of, I got 4,000 square feet to have that amount of space as close as I'm actually in Jersey City, but yeah, it's expensive. So
it's expensive.
Yeah.
Put me in my, you know, my apartment basement or something. Let me work on a bike.
No question. No question.
Kenny, speaking of specialization and your space, I'm curious about how you've carved the niche out. So you've created the unique space for NYC Norton, and it's a competitive world of motorcycle restoration, also building and restoring. But how did you carve that out as a restorer of Norton vintage bikes?
You know, it became sort of on-the-job training when I started racing and tearing these things down and learning a lot about the idiosyncrasies of an engine. I didn't know anything about internal combustion, you know, and now it's like I talk about piston to wall and, you know, that sort of stuff, just building that stuff up. So in the Norton restoration world, particularly in the U.S. anyway, there was me, and then there was this guy out in Colorado, Matt Rambo, who's a buddy of mine, and he did incredibly beautiful motorcycles. He stopped. He's smart. He got out of this, and he now sells Norton parts.
Rambo was a madman.
Doesn't do, but he had Colorado Norton Works, and their bikes are spectacular. And so Matt's bikes kind of came from a cruiser, sort of like beautiful, polished, everything lowered, real sexy looking bikes. And I kind of came from a performance race bike thing. And so there was room for both of us. Certainly when Matt retired, I picked up a lot of his work. And at the same time, I've also stepped up the finish of my bikes. They were always beautifully finished, but they were it was sort of forms following function. And now sometimes, you know, I'll get a bike and I'll get a customer and he'll say, look, I want this to be the most beautiful thing. I'm going to ride it a few times. And, you know, it's easy to malign somebody for, but it's like Max. No one's going to jump on that Ferrari and ride from LA to New York, or actually, I hope they do. And I hope Max does. But so sometimes I gauge my customers and say, okay, do you want a bike that you're going to ride through the twisties and put 40,000 miles on a year? Or do you want a bike that you're going to ride 4 times a year down to the coffee shop? But man, it's going to look spectacular.
Attention.
And we gauge from that. So sorry, guys.
You're good.
This is my wonderful post lady here. This is the small business stuff. She knocked on my door here, and my mail has been delivered.
Let's go.
Sorry. So
that's okay.
So did I answer the question?
Yeah. Well, what about give us a lesson that you learned, like a memorable story from the workshop that taught you kind of a serious lesson that about running a small business. You know, was there a moment in time where you kind of were just like it all just made sense,
Or didn't make sense,
or didn't make sense? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, so every shop deals with this. Very rarely will a shop be as transparent, but there's been times where I built a bike and had to travel across the country to find out that the wire had come off a coil, because
wow.
my customers pay so much money for these bikes. You know, we test the shit out of them. We got to ride them. I'm pointing out
course.
this direction here.
Yeah.
We don't have the best roads out here, so we sort of parted out a little test track. We got to put 75, 80 miles on a bike before it can even go to the customer, just because I want to shake it down.
That's right.
But, you know, when you got to hop on an airplane because some guy's like, dude, I just paid you whatever it is, and you got to come out and make this thing run. And I'm like, well, can we FaceTime? And so those sort of lessons are, I mean, it's incredible. You could look at the money that comes in. I remember once when I was building 3 sealies, I'm sort of digressing, but I had like 200 grand in the bank, and I had bills for $195,000. You know what I mean?
I know,
So
man.
it was like,
People don't realize that shit, man. They just see the money coming in. They don't understand what's gone out to get that. No doubt.
Exactly. So when you got to hop on an airplane now and go out and fix because the wires come off a coil or something, that's like, okay,
Yeah.
these things have to leave and they have to be bulletproof. And you know, I'm behind the 8 ball on this because Nortons are notoriously unreliable. So my whole charge is to make them as reliable as possible, because I don't want to get that call. I'm on the side of the Long Island Expressway, or I'm on the side of the 405 or wherever the hell I am, you know, and what's happening here? So that's the big thing.
Kenny, can I ask you a question? Hey
guys, the show will be back in 1 minute right after a word from our sponsor.
Hey, One Gang, tired of feeling like your butt's taking more of a beating than your bike on those long rides? Introducing Butt Buffer, the ultimate solution to saddle soreness. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. These cushions are made from medical-grade viscoelastic polymer, scientifically crafted to eliminate pressure points and keep your circulation flowing. No more numb nuts or numb butts. And here's the best part. Butt Buffer cushions are made right here in the U.S. for the last 30 years. From Harleys to Hondas, we've got a cushion to fit your ride perfectly. Plus, with styles ranging from sleek pebble polymer to luxurious sheepskin, there's a Butt Buffer for every rider's style. Get your Butt Buffer today at buttbuffer.com. That's buttbuffer.com. Your butt will thank you, and you'll ride longer and happier. We've got your butt covered.
When you're doing these types of builds that like these Nortons, right? Are you still using more of the original parts that the bikes came with, or you building like yesterday's looks with today's technology?
Wiring and electronics are all new. And I use a lot of Moto Gadget stuff. It's this German company, and they make these really beautiful sort of like CAN bus brain systems for the wire breakout and stuff. So all the wiring, my harness work is beautiful. I guess that comes from my musician days, working with that. And you know, it didn't start that way, but I really had to refine it. The crankcases, the cylinders, the head, that's all original stuff and restored. The frames are original, the hubs are original, but we'll lace it with new wheels. So, you know, tanks, when you get to the paint work or the tanks and stuff, that's real easy to change up. But the core, you know, for the street bike restoration stuff anyway, it's all, there's a very fundamental core that I have to work from. And, you know, I could talk for hours and hours and hours, but I'll tell you, and this is going to be a segue I'm sure you guys wanted to bring up, and that is what's the future. These bikes and their owners are 70, 80 years old now. The bikes aren't 70 years, you know, the Commandos that I'm doing restorations of are 50 years old. The owners are 80 years old, 70 years old. So the idea of some guy getting his bike and bringing his donor bike in to restore is changing. And I get, you know, I'll post something on Instagram and I'll get, you know, a few hundred likes, and then I'll post something on Instagram and it'll go viral, a stock Commando or something, and I'll get 20,000 likes. And then the phone starts ringing
and it's 212 numbers, New York City numbers, and these are high roller banker dudes
Right.
who don't have a donor bike. They don't have
Mhm.
anything. They see something cool on the internet and they want it like this.
That's
you know?
right.
And I hate to say it, but that's my customer base nowadays. These older guys, I still have tons of restoration work going on, but at the same time, I think it's time for me to take the core of these bikes, buy them in advance, and have bikes ready to go. Because these guys
Absolutely.
always call me and they say, "Hey, can I come to your showroom?" And I said, "I don't have a showroom. Do you have a donor bike? And can you wait a year for a bike?" Boom, sale is lost. These guys want it
Man.
now. They're going to walk down to the Maserati
Right.
place and buy a car instead,
Right,
and
right.
and there's a lot of philosophical problem with that for me, because I want people that ride their bikes. It's the racer in me.
Right.
You can't fake a fast lap. It says it on the back of my T-shirt there, and I'm not.
Cool.
This is real shit
And
here, so I don't.
in addition to, I mean, I myself own a shop too, so we build bikes. And in addition to, I mean, all the money to be able to fulfill those types of customers, you have to build 2 or 3 different models, put them out there, get them out there for sale in order
Yeah.
to do it. That's money out of pocket.
Sure.
You don't know how long the return on investment is going to be. So it's
Yeah.
a costly thing for a small business. So I get what you're saying
Right.
as far as that.
For the last 15 years, I worked on commission. Someone says, "I want a bike." I say, "It costs this much money. I want half down now." And then we do payment installments and boom, there's money coming in. So concurrently, I'm going to have to build ready to go bikes, ready to go within a few weeks. Someone can come in, these rich urban bikers can come in and say, "I want the red one." These aren't guys that grew up with Norton.
Right, right.
These are guys that the same guy that would see an Aston Martin and say, "Oh, James Bond had one. That's cool. I want that too."
I want one. Yeah.
And I've thought about my business. I'm not in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm in the New York City area. I might as well capitalize on that. And
Absolutely.
I don't want
Absolutely.
to. I'm not selling out, but I'm thinking about how I can keep this going, because my target customer base is dying. I mean, we're aging out here.
Yeah.
These Nortons are 50 years old, 60 years old sometimes, and these guys are, the funnel is getting like this. So I gotta keep this moving.
It's not about selling out, bro. It's about being able to put food on the table every day.
Yeah, sure.
Keep a roof over your head. It's about
And
it's
do
about
Norton
continue
motorcycles.
Correct. And it's about
Yeah,
continuing what
exactly.
you're passionate about. It has nothing to
Yeah,
do with
yeah,
selling out.
yeah.
Selling
Thank
out,
you,
that's
thank
a bullshit word for
No,
people
but,
who have
I-
never done it.
I think about this a lot. I think about it because even when I started racing, as I mentioned, a lot of people thought, "Who's this guy? Who's this New York City guy, this musician guy that's going to go out and race motorcycles?" And, I started off slow, but I did
Right,
it.
right.
And I know how to twist the throttle, and I know how to go around a corner. And it's the same thing with building the bikes. I start out, "Yeah, sure, I can do that for you. Yeah, sure, buddy." And now I'm like, "Nope, this is the way it's going to be. And this is it." But it's authentic when it gets to your door. So if you're some dude that works for Goldman Sachs, or you're some guy that's had the bike since 1974, it's the same thing that's going to end up in your driveway.
Cool.
Yeah. And you're getting more Nortons on the road, and that
For-
in turn has that trickle down effect too, because you've got those guys sometimes will have kids, but you've got other people that are seeing them on the road, so you're creating stories through that.
I know where
butterfly
everyone
effect.
is.
And in addition
befo-
to, it's just
That's
an
cool.
absolutely gorgeous bike anyway. Norton,
Thank you.
Triumph,
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it is. They're so cool.
BSAs. I mean, like,
It's
I love
such a
Harley.
ubiquitous
I
English
love
bike.
Harley,
Yeah.
but those 3 are still super special. I mean, I don't think
the
there's
silhouette of that
one
Harley
motorcycle
behind you?
enthusiast.
They're silhouettes. I see that, I see Dennis Hopper behind you, and the Norton Triumph BSA silhouette is so like, wow, British 1970,
Absolutely.
1965, whatever. And yeah, that spoke to me. That was the whole reason I was there. I was going to say, when I bought my Commando, I'd only seen 2 Nortons besides my dad's in person in New York. And I remember I was going to a bank machine once, and there was a Commando, and the guy had it running, and he was using the cash machine. And I was like, "Oh, check it. It sounded so good." It wasn't like open pipe Harley, but it just,
Yeah.
they sound tough. They're badass bikes. So there's something that just drove me, and I'm sucked in, and the sweet, sweet siren of a British parallel twin.
Did you guys see that movie, the Bob Dylan movie that's been
No.
playing out there?
They called me. They wanted very specific year Norton for the movie. They actually filmed it in Jersey City, right down the street.
No
But my
shit.
guy that works for me, Pushrod Tom, he also had a BSA that he was going to put in the movie. The guy that did the bike wrangling is a buddy of mine. So
That was a Triumph that they used, right?
yeah, Dylan wrote a Triumph, but there was
that was such a
apparently-
sick sound. That sound,
Yeah,
I don't know if
yeah.
you, man, I was just like, oh my God, that sound is just,
yeah.
you
It's
just
so
can't copy.
beautiful.
The new stuff,
No.
the new stuff is nice, technology-wise, of course, and electronics, if you like all that crazy shit on it. Me, I'm more of the sound of the motor and the
Oh, for sure.
exhaust, man.
For sure. And, you got a Harley that's doing this, but a Norton's doing this, and it's just shaking itself to death like a paint shaker. But man, that exhaust note that comes out of the pipes is,
So beautiful.
it's different than a Harley, but it's very, very distinct and beautiful.
Yep, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So Kenny, I wanted to get into community building. How has building relationships within the motorcycle community impacted and, the growth and direction of NYC Norton? And a second part to that is, what advice would you give to somebody starting out in a small shop and longing to build that community?
Yeah. Two very good questions. So when I started NYC Norton, as I said, the Cafe Racer thing was going on. And so I went to, I was on Cafe Racer TV, for God's sake, but I went to great pains to try and not get caught up in that, to just say, look, I got to do what I've got to do. I'm in Jersey City. All the hip kids are in Brooklyn with their motorcycles. They're across
Right.
Manhattan on the other side. There in and of itself, I sort of created this separate thing. So the community, I fought against it for a long time. But then when I could relax, when I could have my business, I knew my business was going to be there in the morning when I wake up. I sort of lowered some of my arrogance is the wrong word, but my protection of myself. And I feel like there's a lot of people that are so important to me that have been there with me all along. There's a guy out in Brooklyn that does all my really special welding, and he's been part of the community for a long time. I've developed all of these great relationships. God, Corinna, who does all the seat upholstery for me. She rides the wall, used to ride the Wall of Death. She's like this crazy motorcycle nutter, and she does the most beautiful upholstery. So I reach out and it's all, and they come to me too. And, they want some stuff done for their bikes. So I love the community. It took me a while to warm up and let it be on my terms, because I was so protective of my element. And I'm super, super chill now. I love the community. But to start off on a shop, my God, the biggest thing I could say is, and it took me a long time, is to keep your focus. Just like you said, when I started off, I was so hungry, I would take in anything. Guide say, hey, I've got a little Yamaha Chappie mini bike. Can you work on that for me for a while? I'm like, well, all right, bring it in. And, and 80 hours later, I'm still trying to figure out how to take the crankcases apart. So it's a losing venture. Keep your focus. And that's why, the Norton stuff for me has been, like I started off tightening up the exhaust on the frame, and now I'm completely rebuilding and boring out cylinders and, relieving valve cutouts and that sort of stuff. So I just stayed my focus, and that's what somebody needs to do, is be a specialist. It's a tiny industry. And as we all know, I talked about that funnel of Norton's, about the funnel of motorcycle and motorsports and power sports. It's, when I was a kid, man, I'd ride my RM80 and we'd crash it on the hill, and then we'd go party with our buds. And now these kids are playing with their phones, and it's like,
I know.
It's not just
it's
the
just a
community
different
that's
world.
dwindling,
So
but you've
keep
also
your focus, because there's no room for.
got the skilled professionals that they're they're not a dime a dozen.
That's right.
They're
That's right.
Diamonds in the
I
rough.
live in a white collar environment. I kind of came from a white collar upbringing, or, music, but I wasn't a wrench. I never had dirty hands. And it was really unique and soul opening. I don't want to get too existential, but craft, soul craft, whatever that book's called, there's some truth. I come into work in the morning and I flick the lights on and I bitch about my job, and then I put my feet up on my desk and I look at all those shiny tanks and I say, you know what? Things are all right.
Well, that's good. That kind of leads us to the adjustment world from what when you started to current day, what do you think the biggest adjustment you made in regards to working smarter, not harder type of a mentality?
Yeah, I got into a loop, as I said, where we were just bringing in all kinds of work and Norton work. I did keep my focus, but we would do.
Is your
we
concentration more on the race bikes than it is on just actual commission builds?
That's a separate question, and I'll answer that because
Okay.
that's my business is structured in 3 places, and I'll
Awesome.
explain that in a minute.
Okay.
But in the early on, I would stick to Norton. First, I would take the Yamaha Chappie. Then I decided that's, the random bike that's not a Norton, and that didn't work out. And then I stuck to Nortons, but we would do half restorations.
Gotcha.
And, because they're expensive as hell. And these guys would come in and say, I can't afford this, but can you just, paint my tank and do this? But what happened was, as a brand, you go out, you'd see this thing go up for sale on eBay and it says it's an NYC Norton bike. And and it's an eighth of a restoration. And I'm like, no, it's not an NYC Norton bike. So what I had to do is really buckle down. And this is the adjustment I had to make. And it's like, I'll do an engine for you, I'll do a gearbox for you, or I'll do a full restoration for you. And there's really not a lot of gray area anymore.
Understand.
And I'm in the quality position now where I have enough work that I can be that. And often I get calls or emails and they're like, hey, I wanted to do this. I'm like, I'm sorry, it's this or nothing. And
Gotcha.
there's a lot of nothing, but it sort of, it's hard to let a $10,000 job go, let's say, but when you're going to get twice that or 3 times that, if you just stay your course, and you'll get,
That's the thing.
for everyone, and it's quality over quantity.
And
And that
once
was the
again,
thing I
we're
had to-
working smart, not hard.
Yes, exactly. Well,
I mean,
working
hard,
smart
of
and
course, is
hard.
part of it, but it's working smart because it's staying to closest
Yeah.
to your strengths. You're playing to your strengths, and in addition to those jobs tend to be financially commissioned better
Yeah.
than other ones.
Yeah. And so that's a good segue into the way my business is structured. So I have Norton Commando mostly, but Norton street bike restoration. That's, say, 1/3 of my business. Then I have race bike builds, which is another third of the business. Then I have racing clients. And so the way that evolved was I was racing myself. I'd throw my bike in my van and I go out racing. And then I got a call from a guy who wanted a Sealy, and nice guy. And I built this beautiful Sealy G50 for him. And a G50 is a 500cc single matchless engine in the Sealy bike. It's like that.
Oh yeah,
That's a
sick.
Sealy. That's me
That's
at
sick.
Phillip Island a few years ago. But
That's
so
killer.
I built the sister bike to that. And I said, okay, bike's done. I'll bring it to the races and you take it away. And he said, any chance I could hire you to just kind of take care of the bike and deliver it to the races for me? And I thought, yeah, I really don't want to do that. And then a buddy of mine said, are you crazy? This guy's got money. He's a great guy. Buddy up with this guy. So I did it, Helmand. And he ended up buying 3 bikes off me, built the bikes. He started the racing division of NYC Norton. So now I build street bikes, I build race bikes, and a lot of those race bikes I build, the customers say, hold on to them, maintain them, bring them to the races. These are, wealthy dudes that fly in their helicopter, whatever. Not really, I'm joking.
I know what
but,
you mean. I know what you mean.
But they hop on their bike, they ride them, and all of them are fast. I mean, pretty much everyone on my team is a fast rider, and so they're the real deal. But they have big jobs they go home to on Monday, and I bring the bikes back. The beauty of it is race bikes break. I don't care if you're riding the Yamaha R1 or a Norton Twin. You got to come back and tear them down. So there's work there, and I don't hope that a bike's going to break, but invariably they do, and they come back, and I get to tear the thing down. And it's a bike I built, so I know how to tear it down. I know how to rebuild it, put it right back, and deliver it to the racetrack to them the next day, which is exactly what I'm going to do here in a few hours. I'm taking 5 bikes down to Carolina Motorsports Park in South Carolina, and got riders who are going to hop on them and do their thing.
That's cool. All right, here's a difficult question. In an ever-evolving industry, how do you keep NYC Norton relevant, adapting to change while still honoring the legacy of the classic motorcycle?
Well, it's not, it might be difficult for a different type of business to answer, but like I said, Norton did all the heavy lifting. I do Nortons. If you want a Norton,
That makes sense. Yeah.
you come to me. I'm not doing just motorcycles. I can speak about motorcycles. I see guys, I know guys that own shops, or dealerships or whatever, and watching it change, look at KTM. KTM,
Yeah.
boom,
Yeah.
just gone.
Yeah.
And KTM to me,
I know, man.
that was like an awesome, cool brand that,
Mhm.
they did these beautiful
Mhm.
bikes. They did bespoke little race bikes, the KTM 390 Cup. You could go out and buy this
Yeah.
race bike for like $4,000. It was bad to the bone. Go out and
Yeah.
race this thing and boom,
I
plug is
know.
pulled, done.
That's so crazy.
And
I
it's
read
just,
about that. That blew me away.
and we think about Harley, big American company. They've had some
in a
tough
world,
times
they're
too.
in a
you know?
world of shit right now, man.
Yeah, yeah.
World
So-
of shit.
So, and let's talk, I'm not an authority on Harley by any means, but I can talk about they're this incredible, like loyal customer. I mean, yeah, that's the understatement of the year, but these guys are not 25 years old anymore. These guys are aging out too. We're young kids in this crowd. So Harley's rethinking this too. And, a guy came to me a while ago. I'm going off on a tangent here, but he came to me and he wanted to do this video about my shop. It was really for his reel, but he wanted to use my shop as a background. And I said, sure. And he showed me this commercial of this ad that he had seen. He's a European guy. I'm not quite sure where he's from. He said, look at this. This is sort of the style I want to do. And it showed this headlight turn on. And you couldn't see the bike or anything. You could just see the headlight turn on. It was riding down this cobblestone street kind of at dusk or at dawn in the morning. And I said, yeah, that's really beautiful. What is that? And he said, oh, that's an ad for a Harley electric bike over in Europe. And I was like, holy smokes. That's so different from the way they market the brand here in the US. But Harley's doing that electric bike thing, and that's got people like, spinning out of
They're
heads.
failing. They're failing miserably.
Well, yeah. And the thing is, we could talk about the electric stuff.
It's not
too.
even
That's-
them. They sold the Livewire division. It's no longer under Harley Davidson.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Did they?
Somebody purchased the Livewire brand. So
Yeah.
Harley kind of, it's a losing business.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, in the States where everything is so spread apart, it's hard. I mean, look at Zero. They've been here for 30 years. They haven't made a profit once. I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking about a monster too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
U.S. is a tough world to crack when it comes to
So what do we do,
electric
you know?
motorcycles.
Internal combustion vintage bikes. Like I said, I got it easy because I'm so specialized. I'm such a niche. Somebody once said you're a niche celebrity in a niche market, and you've got your niche crowd, and you are
That's
Mr.
right.
Niche there. But if you're a shop and you're slogging along and you're working on, CB 350s and R1s and Nortons and anything else, is it dying? Is it dwindling? Yeah, it's dwindling. I mean, I can't even run down to an auto parts store if I wanted to buy something. There's no Napa in New York City. There's not, and so I see it. It's happening. It's closing in on us. There's always going to be cars. There's always going to be motorcycles, at least in our lifetimes, but it's going to be more and more and more compartmentalized and specialized.
Agreed. Yeah.
Mhm.
So what advice would you give aspiring entrepreneurs? Let's say, what would you offer to someone listening to this that is looking
Run away.
No, wait, not necessarily just the motorcycle world, because I'm talking about somebody that's listening that's looking to turn their passion into a sustainable business, like we did. We love motorcycles. We opened up motorcycle shops. Well, what would you give somebody? What kind of advice would you tell them?
Well, you see these cliches all the time, do something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. That's
Right.
bullshit, because I work my ass off. I love motorcycles, but I'm also going to tell you,
You work your ass off.
when I was working at the art book publisher, all I wanted to do is clock out at 6 o'clock and go work on my bike or ride my bike around the neighborhood or go out, on the weekends.
Right.
Now I've taken what I love, I've made it my job, and at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, I want to go home and I want to not think about
Right.
motorcycles for a while. So the entrepreneurial thing, take what you love and do it, but no, it's going to pull a little bit of that passion out of you, because I got to come in and turn the lights on and deal with a guy that's pissed off at me because, you know, his bike isn't built yet and the sun, it's finally got 60 degrees out and I told him to be ready in June, but it's March and it's 60 and let's go, you know. And so you have this sort of stuff. So I don't know if that's the answer that you were
No, that's
looking
great
for,
advice, man. I
but
love
I'm
it.
saying like that, do something you love because you're going to, but you're doing it to do something because entrepreneur, the whole concept is you're going to put some money in and you might not get it back out for a long time. So make sure when you go in and you do something like that, that you're doing something that you do love. So you will put that extra effort in. Like I talked about the hose clamps or pulling the carbs off and putting different carbs on the bike or whatever it is. I do that because I love it, because I care about it, not because it's a loss. So to get to that level of exceptional ability, you have to put a lot of free energy into this. And so, yeah, it takes a lot of the love out of it. But then again, I get to go on a racetrack and go like this. And
That's right.
Can and just say, here we go. And so that's it. That makes it
Kenny,
worth it.
those are great words that you said. It may take a lot of the love out of it. That's an awesome. That's probably one of the best things we've heard. We've been doing this for 2 years now. So somebody's saying that, because if you really think about it, that is the truth. It's all passion, but sometimes you're not sleeping. You're not sleeping well at night. You're
not
stressed
eating.
out.
Yeah.
You're not eating. You're worried about how bills are going to be paid, things like that. Then you get this big run of success, and then you feel better. And then all of a sudden, because of this success, you've got to put that same money that you just made back into the months that you weren't making money.
It's cash flow,
It's
emotion flow too. There's an ebb, and you know, it's like this undulating sine wave of like, you're up, you're down, you're up, you're down. And when you look at it in the long view, it's a long straight line. But when you're in it, in the detail and you're in the weeds, it's like this, it's like this, it's like this. And that's the hardest thing I had to learn. I can't just phone it in one day and build my website on company time, you know, and then my boss walks in and flip to the spreadsheet. I got to go in and actually get stuff done.
Yeah.
That's funny, man.
So Kenny, here's a two-parter. Are you working on anything fun, exciting right now? And the second part is, where can people track with you? Where are you most active online, so people can see what you're up to these days?
I'm doing a beautiful, so the featherbed, I talked a little bit about my first race bike was a featherbed with a Commando engine. I got a call from a guy in Wisconsin, and good guy. And he said, you know, he kept sending me, he said, I want to do a Norton. I'm not sure what. And I said, do you go on the internet and find pictures of Nortons and send them? That's how we start the dialogue when I start with a new customer, particularly a custom bike customer. So he kept sending me pictures, and I'm like, dude, that's my bike. Dude, that's a bike I built. Dude, that's my bike. He's like, I really like the color of this frame. I'm like, that's my bike. And he's like, oh, okay, well, pretty much do it. So we sort of zeroed in on a street version of my first race bike, a featherbed with a Commando engine in it. But we've done a whole bunch of stuff, and it's, you know, these bikes, you know, the real custom bikes, they take a lot longer and they take a lot of energy, and they're actually not, I hate to talk about dollars so much, but if I do a Norton Commando restoration, I know exactly how many hours are going into it as a rule, and how much the cost of goods is to go into it. When you do a custom bike, you sort of give an estimate of what it's going to be. And I like to stick to my estimates, because you get project creep. The customer's not happy. I'm not happy. So I'm really, really concise about, this is what it's going to be. Do you agree to this? Yes. Okay, good. So then I have to stick to it. So when I try something on it, and I've talked about this, you put a primary on it and you got a belt drive on it, and the primary doesn't look right. You got to take it off, and it's on my dime to do that. So any custom fab like that, you know, any custom job gets intense and labor intensive. So sometimes you just got to sit back and look at it and think about it for a while. And it's not just, you know, okay, we're going to put the engine in the frame, and then we're putting the wheels on, and we're going to put the front end on in this. So I'm doing a very cool Norton. It's the long way of me saying, and this is, you know, I'd say I'm in the last third of it. It's going to start showing up on my social media, which is going to bridge to your thing, NYC Norton, it's everywhere. It's Instagram and Facebook. And you can see, in fact, the internet has changed in my business. I had big flashing website and stuff, but people don't even really go to websites anymore. If you want information about my bikes in detail, you can go to the website, but just go to Instagram, and I'm always posting something up there about bikes going around a racetrack or on the lifts or whatever. My cool, leaky, freezing cold in the winter, very hot in the summer window. And
Out of all the platforms,
Right on, cool.
that's my favorite too. I mean, Facebook is just Facebook's annoying, and X I don't even go on. TikTok, I don't go on. I mean, Instagram's the only one where I kind of see the work that people are doing and kind of follow up.
And
with
I
it.
started, as we talked about, I started with NYC Norton as a blog, and I'd have to update the website and upload pictures. And now, Instagram just really takes care of that. And some of my clients are 70, 80 years old, and they're like, I don't want to go on to that.
Right.
Instagram.
Their
thing. I'm
website
like,
people,
yeah, if you want to see what I'm doing, that's where to go. The website is very static. It's a business card, and then the Instagram link there will show you the active dynamic content.
Right on.
All right, buddy.
You made it through. We're going to the speed round now. We've got 15 questions in 2 minutes.
Okay, let's do it.
Are we doing any bets here, or is it just 15 questions?
No, because I'm going to lose. Fire away.
We usually grease the numbers a little bit. All right, first question. What's the best motorcycle you've ever ridden or owned?
Oh, my Sealy 750 race bike, without question.
Nice. Without a doubt. Easy. All right, your music station is stuck on one channel in your shop. What band are you hoping it is?
Wow. Ooh, that's a complex one, Larry. Okay.
Genre, if it's easier, what band would be good?
Yeah. God, that's a deep one, because that's really hard. Music is a whole, we'll do a whole separate podcast about my opinions of music.
Let's do it.
Shit. I don't know.
Who was a band that was very influential in the beginning of your career?
I grew up in like new wave stuff. I listened to the other day I was driving to a race and I listened to the Cars. When I was a kid and the Cars first album came out, and I listened to, just what I needed in that. And I don't mind you coming here. And it sort of like took off the whole world.
They rock.
And it was like Elliot Easton playing guitar. That dude is like a genius.
He is.
So I have a hard time listening to music.
I grew up in Boston. I used to see them in little clubs, man, all the time.
Yeah,
they're an awesome band.
But I get into this retro phase when I go racing, because I can't really listen to new music because I think too much about it. So if I'm driving or something, I'll just put on the Cars or something like that and listen to Candy-O. And it's like, it takes me back to when I was a kid and I was starting to play music, and I was like, this is cool shit, man.
Cars
it
is then. Cars it is.
Cars it is for
Awesome.
today.
For today. All right, if you could ride anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Oh my God, for sure. That's a two-part question. If I'm on the street, what I did in Italy, riding down through, from the north of Italy all the way down to the south, there's this sort of like, you pull into a little town and you go into some place. It's not even a restaurant. It's just a doorway. And then this woman says, let me sit down. I got you. And they bring cheese and meat, and you sit in the backyard in the sunshine in Tuscany. You got a Moto Guzzi that's tinking because it's cooling down outside. That's it. And then if I'm on a race bike, Phillip Island in Australia is like racing in heaven. I mean, there's kangaroos run across the track and the ocean that's right there, but it's the most incredible racetrack. And it's so fast and it's so flowing. And I've ridden on so many racetracks, and some of them are very technical. Barber's very technical. But Phillip Island just has it. There's not one turn there that's fantastic. It's the entire layout and the way that you're on the gas and then you're off. And it's intangible. I can't really explain it. But when you can race like that and you're flying down that front straightaway and the ocean's right in front of you and the fog might be there, and then you just brake a little bit and tip it in at turn one, you're doing 150 miles an hour on a Sealy G50, and it's like, that's livable.
That's killer.
That's wild.
That's killer.
You do a great job of
I
painting
was
a
just about to
picture.
say.
I put
I just
myself
felt
in
like I
Italy
was
with
on
you
it.
and then Australia.
I gotta go
All
back.
right. All right. Guilty pleasure alcoholic beverage, and if you're not a drinker, what's your go-to snack?
I am the straightest dude you will ever know because I was not the straightest dude. And I would
That
put
makes sense.
anything in my system for a long period of time and did put everything in my system for a long period of time. My drink now is a little bit of New York City fancy frou-frou espresso every morning. And then this morning I had 2 of them, which is why I'm going like this,
All
you know,
right,
I'm
right.
firing
Snickers,
on all
right
cylinders.
on.
Good.
Cool. I'm gonna get me some of that.
That's fine.
All right. Okay. Is there a skill or hobby you have that might surprise people?
Ooh. No, I've turned them all into jobs. My skills and hobbies that surprise people. Let me think here. No, I'm shooting at so much stuff too. You know, my wife's like, you got to fix the blinds in the house, and I'm like up there trying to drill. You know, I can
They're
set
falling.
your valve to piston clearance, but I can't, you know, hang the
Right, right,
blinds.
what
No,
the-
I'm actually bad at a bunch of shit. So
That's
cool.
surprising.
That's cool.
yeah, right.
Yeah. All right. If you could meet one person, past or present, who are you having dinner with?
Wow. Wow. I'd have to think about that for a minute.
John Lord.
Deep Purple. I'm not sure. Would it be a musician? Bowie. Bowie. You know
David
why? I
Bowie.
was talking
Right
about
on.
Bowie the other day. I grew up with Bowie and I had my love of Bowie and that he wasn't cool and that he was cool. But I talked about him the other day because there's a big Bowie mural on the side of the building over here. And I feel like it's just patronizing to all the business people there. Oh, I live in the Bowie building. But the dude touched so many people. And when he died, you know, he's around and you take him for granted. But then when he's gone, it's like,
Right.
you know, or Prince or Michael Jackson to a lot of people. These are big icons. But Bowie, to me, he was a smart fucker. Sorry.
Yeah, he was.
But
No, it's all
and
good.
he didn't suffer fools. And he
Right.
really, I look back on him historically, you know, when he was on MTV and he was taking them to task for not playing R&B artists and black artists. And the dude did not, I mean, he was the real deal. As space oddity as he was and his weirdo face,
That's
the dude
what
was,
made him so brave, man.
I would love to sit down and chat
Yeah,
with
that's
him.
cool.
That would be cool. All right. Favorite motorcycle movie of all time?
Yeah. I mean, I could say on any Sunday, you know, I have car movies, actually, 2-lane blacktop. We were just talking about it in the shop yesterday. That the guy who works for me, I was like, have you ever seen 2-lane blacktop? It's a car movie, and it's got James Taylor and Dennis Wilson from the Beach Boys in it. It's from 1971. And these guys are out racing this 56 Chevy, I think it is. And they pull over on the side of the road and they're like taking the carbs off and changing the jets and stuff. And it's so geeky, like Motorhead stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool.
yeah.
That's it.
For its
I mean,
era,
I could say Easy Rider. I could say, you know, those are great
How about
motorcycle movies.
World's Fastest Indian. Do you like that one?
Yeah, I like that.
That's
I
a
like
good
that. I
flick.
like that. You know, I surround myself with these sorts of people all the time, like these crazy old dudes. The guy that works for me next door is one of those guys.
That's cool.
He's just a land speed nutter. You know, they go out and do their things. They're, you know, I brought a friend once to the races and I said, just know when you're walking into this paddock that every single person, including me, that you look at has a screw loose somewhere. So, yeah.
All right. Morning person or night owl?
Used to be night, now very much morning. Very much morning. I go to bed early. I get up, I have my coffee, read the news, come in, go to work. You know, I'm here by 8 a.m, and I sometimes don't leave till 8 or 9 at night. And this is my world here right now.
Yep.
So.
Grinding. All right. One pet peeve that drives you crazy.
God. There is no one. There's a million.
Oh, I know.
Tourists in Times Square that look up and take selfies when I'm trying to get to where I'm going. You know, I'm a fast walker.
Yeah.
How about that? That's a safe one.
That works.
That's a good
that
one.
works. That's a safe one. All right. Common mistakes even seasoned riders make when it comes to maintenance.
Oh, maintenance. Putting money into the engine of your motorcycle when you should be focused on handling. The
suspension of a performance.
suspension and tuning of the handling is so important, and make it stop, make it handle, make it go. That's the that's the
Mhm.
regression that I build bikes with. You have to be able to stop because you got to
Absolutely.
get yourself from you got to be able to stop yourself from dying. And then to make
Right.
it handle is super important. You can take a 50 horsepower bike and you can beat an R1 if it can handle better than the R1, you know? So the horsepower, people often throw money at the power of their bike, or, just been putting out like, and people bullshit about their dyno numbers all the time. And I'm like, sure
Right.
thing, dude. But if you can make it handle, that's it.
That's great advice. All right, what one piece of advice you received when you were young that you still live by?
Wow. I have to think that one through. I think my dad gave me some pretty good advice overall, and it took a long time for me to retroactively look back and see it. But it's basically the tenet that I work with now, and that is that, you can be a showman, but you got to keep, it's got to work at the end of the day. So when these
Mhm.
beautiful bikes that I build come off the lift, I want them to work. And that's the most important thing. So it's sort of, again, I point to the back of my t-shirt. It was a saying, you can't fake a fast lap. Guys go
Yeah,
out on the
that's a
racetrack and
great
talk
saying.
so much shit, but your lap times are going to speak for you.
Right,
And
right,
there's no way to avoid that. And that's the same principle and that kind of came from my dad.
That's cool.
That's cool. That's solid advice. I wrote that one down. One builder you would love to team up with to build a fun bike.
Well, Max, we just talked about it.
Right on, amazing.
Max that dude's doing the most spectacular architectural, beautiful stuff, and he knows it. And I've watched him grow, and
And he's still a young guy, man.
yeah, he's a young guy. He's fit, good looking. He's got a nice family, and he's building these beautiful bikes. And to talk about a guy that's got it all. It's out in California. It's got a nice little sun. Walks out in the sun, rides his bikes. He's got got that
Yeah.
guy, the filmmaker guy that follows him around too, which is another cool dude. And so Max is, I really admire him. I
That's
think
cool.
what he's doing is great.
That's cool.
That is wild. Not much of a believer in coincidences.
Right.
And
Yeah,
it's
he was
kinda
on the
crazy.
show
I feel like
yesterday, and
it's-
you're on
we
the show
That's
today.
beautiful.
just had him
That's
yesterday.
awesome, man.
Yeah. All right. Best built year and model Norton ever built.
Well, I have a bias now, don't I? Because I have a 74 850 Commando, and I build them all. And in fact, the racing displacement is 750, but I have an 850 street bike. And so I really started to get into 750s, and you can actually 750s are peppier in Norton's world. They rev higher, they're wheeling machines, let's say. But the 850 is just so sound, and particularly in 75, Norton had to cater to the left side shift. So the bikes all shipped on the right until 75, and then they went to the left like every other motorcycle does.
Right.
And they made they put electric start, and the bike got heavier. So the 74 850, reliable,
That's the way to
lower
go.
stress, more torque. Maybe
I've
not
never
as-
driven I've driven so many motorcycles, and I've never driven a right-sided clutch.
Come on out, man. Come on out.
It's
so that
crazy.
Moto
I,
Guzzi
have
that I
done
ride through
I've
Italy-
done suicide shifts.
Yeah.
I've learned how to ride, and obviously the left side, but I've never done a right side clutch before. So that would be kind of cool to try.
Somebody gave me a Suzuki GS500, which is a perfect commuter bike because you can't leave a Norton tied up in front of your house in New York City. You'll be gone like this.
Right.
No one touches the GS500. It's like, ooh, God, I don't want to have anything to do with that. And it's a left side shift bike, and I haven't ridden it in several years, but I used to commute on it back and forth out to the shop. And there's something when you get on the Norton, you immediately, for me, I know it's right side shift. It's second nature. And then the Suzuki left side shift, they're just two different animals. I get on my race bike, boom, right side shift, street bike, right side shift. Yeah.
That's cool.
Right on. All right. Carbureted or fuel injected?
Well, carbureted for sure. But we put these K&N FCR flat slide CR 35 millimeter carbs on the Nortons, and they've got squirters in them, and it's almost like fuel injection. Man,
Really?
that thing's like,
Yeah.
Nice.
can't put, they're not legal
Jeez.
for racing, but we put them on the street bikes, and it's like, they're not cheap. That carb kit is like, $1,800 or something like
Damn.
that. But man,
Wow.
does it transform the
Jeez.
motorcycle.
That's cool.
So, yeah, I'm a carbureted
Yeah.
guy. Come on. I still clean
Right on.
jets.
Figured. Nice. All right. Last question. Besides the One Gang Worldwide podcast, of course, what other podcasts or media do you consume?
Good question. I watch the news. I watch all different kinds of news. I'm not going to get into politics here, but I don't listen to a lot of motorsport podcasts. I do when I'm driving and I listen to stuff. And there's this Formula One podcast that I stumbled on that was beautiful because these guys are on such a level of insanity that they're doing and the money that just flows into that sort of stuff. But mostly I listen to left and right down the center of politics, and I make up my own mind about things.
Exactly.
And I sort of live or
Whoa.
die by that. You know, it's like I'm not
You're a
gonna,
critical thinker.
yeah, I'm a critical
That's
thinker,
crazy.
exactly. And I'm going to question
We're
every
a dire
goddamn
It's
authority
it's important
out there.
to be
Yeah.
to be center, man, and that's the
Yes,
reality,
exactly.
you know.
Exactly.
It's just,
Exactly.
You
In
can't
this
be, you can't
world
be
right
too
now, I'm
yeah.
happy to be right down there.
You made it through 1 minute and 57 seconds.
Good job,
Nailed
man.
it.
Shit.
Totally.
I was hoping you'd
All
build
right.
us a couple of bikes if you didn't make it, but that didn't work out. Great job, Ben.
Well, you guys are welcome to come test ride all the bikes. You know, this is, okay, I'm going to leave you with a thought. This is a quality problem. This is me bitching about my gold bricks being too heavy. I come into work and I'm like, I got to test ride that bike today. Damn it. I got to change my clothes. I got to put on protective gear. I got to go out, slog the bike out
man.
and go ride it. That's
it's
the downside
terrible.
of my job. You know, it's terrible. I got to go ride a bike
Gosh.
for 50 miles.
Hey, how far away is that test track you were talking about?
So I have very measured rides that I do. There's a little loop around Jersey City that I do. So I'm in Newport of Jersey City, which is close to the water. It's kind of the Shishi area, if there's such a thing, because it looks over Manhattan. But it's stupid to ride around here. But I've got this little secret loop where you can actually get into top gear. And there's this one stretch. It's about 6 blocks long, and you can get the bike into top gear, which I have to do all the time.
Right, of course.
And then so that's the sort of preliminary. We come in, torque, adjust the valves, fix anything that needs tweaking, the steering, you know, whatever it is. Then we go out and we ride out on 78 out to Newark Airport and back. And that is exactly 24 miles there and back, Newark Airport. The shittiest ride in America, trust me. But at least, you know, you're like out there fighting with cars and you're doing your thing like a real everyday ride. And then passes that, then we ride out to my friend Mike Gony's place out in Berkeley Heights, which is exactly 25 miles each way. So another 50 miles. He's got the dyno. This is where we tune the race bikes. And so I first went to Mike's because I thought I can go out there and if something's wrong, at least I've got a safe landing pad out there. And, but then it turned out to be a beautiful ride and it's really good to get out on the bikes and get
So
them
you don't
broken in like
trailer
that.
out there.
No,
You'll ride out there. You don't trailer
we did that
out?
for a
Okay,
while.
cool.
We did trailer out there, but no, the bike's got to be good enough to go out and do that. I will say one thing though, there has to be someone in the shop. When I do a test ride on a bike or we're doing test rides, you know, it's me and Tom and one other guy that work here. There has to be someone that can come get us in the van.
That's right, just in case
Because
something
if
happens.
the bike
Always.
breaks down
That's
in
right.
Newark, I'm not
Yeah,
leaving
you're
the
done.
bike. Someone's going to come and pick me up, you know, and you can't just leave these beautiful bikes sitting on the road.
It's like the old
Kentucky
days.
Fried Chicken.
It's like the old days
Right.
in New York City. I remember growing up in Boston. We had family in New York. And in like early 80s, we'd be driving to visit them in New York. And you see all these cars that are pulled over or broke down.
For sure.
And they're up on the bricks. And all the
yeah.
tires are gone.
in seconds
Yeah.
flat. Yeah.
In seconds flat, man.
Yeah.
Like those guys could be great, like NASCAR crew teams, man. They come in there.
You know, a lot
tear
of
that shit down.
Say that.
Nortons are old enough now that you get them out when they're like, you go into not Manhattan, but you know, if I go into Newark for whatever reason, most people are looking at it like, what the hell is that thing? And then they watch me kickstart it and you're like, yeah, we don't want to have anything to do with that.
That's funny, man.
That's not going to
funny.
work for us.
That's cool. Well, Kenny, thanks, man. We just wanted
Hey,
to
guys.
say thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule,
Pleasure.
coming on the show, man. It's been, you know, we've been following your journey for a long time, but to get a
Thank
chance to get to know you on a one-on-one basis, man, you're a true stand-up guy, and we're
Thank you.
very grateful you gave us the time.
Yeah, man. Happy to be
Definitely.
here and happy to hang out and shoot the breeze with like-minded folks, right?
Awesome,
you know,
man. That's
I've
right.
got to go
Right
into
on.
my little cave now and go make motorcycles. Oh,
I
well.
know.
Oh,
you
no.
poor thing.
Yeah,
That-
right.
For all the listeners out there, for our audience, everybody listening or watching, one of your slogans on your website is "We build beauty."
Yeah.
And I don't think we could agree more.
Thank
so
you.
any of you guys that are out there listening, definitely check out it's nycnorton.com or check out his Instagram and you'll be blown away. Some of the
If you guys love
sexiest
vintage
bikes I've ever
bikes,
seen.
man,
Yeah.
you know, I mean,
They're so
I don't
sweet.
know one Harley rider who's a true Harley rider as far as the old school that's not passionate about Nortons, BSAs, or
Sure.
Triumphs. You know what I mean? Like that era just all combines together, man. So
Yeah,
what,
you know,
what
and
you're
there's-
doing is just fucking gorgeous.
It's so
Thank you
cool.
very much. And there's a lot of that, you know, like, I don't like these bikes. I don't like these bikes. The Norton, again, right down the middle. Everybody loves Nortons and Triumphs and BSAs because they're sort of like just the ubiquitous.
Absolutely.
The Harley guys love us. The sport bike guys love
That's
us.
right.
The adventure guys love us. And I'm totally happy being right there, right, boom, right in the middle.
Heck yeah.
And that's where you are.
Yeah, carved out a good spot. Thanks, Kenny,
Awesome,
man. We
dudes.
appreciate you.
Appreciate
This was
you,
awesome.
brother.
Thank you so much.
Be
Talk
good.
to you soon.
Have a safe,
Keep
safe
kicking ass.
travels
Yeah,
to South
that's
Carolina.
Right.
Thank you.
Kick ass on the track.
Thanks, guys.
See you, brother. Thank you.